Hello there, welcome to the channel. This is Nerdworld, and today we're delving into lore from Star Trek Lower Decks, a show that I have found it difficult to love, but I have persevered with it, and I have found things in it that I genuinely think I like. And one thing I do like about that show is how it brings realistic perspective to certain technologies and concepts within Star Trek, and particularly within Starfleet, that were somewhat neglected. I mean, in my opinion, Wesley Crusher was not an accurate representation of what a teenage boy would be like. I mean, he managed to get himself sentenced to death for not wanting Snoo Snoo, basically, so... seriously, what? Anyway. This episode is going to be on the Starfleet Holo Simulation Pods, used by a Federation drill instructor to test the crew of the USS Cerritos. And with that said, please like, share, subscribe, comment down below, and discuss with me the Federation Holo Pods. The Holo Pods brought aboard the USS Cerritos and set up in operation in the vessel's cargo bays existed to test the crew. Now, I love this design. I think this is a perfect piece of technology. Perfectly engineered. It is very task oriented and it makes a lot of sense. The whole point of the holodeck in the first place, or holo simulators, or whatever you want to call them, because I know there's a few different terms like holo suite, and it tends to be a differential in the application of the technology. There tends to be in Star Trek a sort of word use where a holo suite is more planetary based, maybe it's on a star base, or maybe a particularly impressive space station like Deep Space Nine, and holo suites are larger and more complicated, and the holo projections are more detailed, and the environments and landscapes and things they can simulate are more impressive. Whereas a holo deck is more something aboard a starship and is more for recreational purposes, as well as for training. They are the perfect operation. I mean, you can train how to fly a shuttle, train how to fly the ship, train with weapons, train in combat. You can train for different environments, different levels of gravity, atmosphere, zero atmosphere, you name it. It is the perfect training tool that any military or government or educational system on this planet right now would absolutely kill to have. And the holopod is a natural progression of that technology. It's a miniaturized, scaled down version, because clearly, as with any technology, as we know, as it gets more advanced, you learn how to miniaturize it, you make it more compact. Now, it's pretty obvious that the holopods would be more limited than a full holodeck, and certainly than a holo suite, but for the task training purposes, they were absolutely perfect. And I can see why the Federation drill instructors or Starfleet drill instructors would use them. Because you basically load all these onto a cargo ship, you take it out to meet up with whatever vessel, you put them on board, and then one by one the crew go aboard these things. You can fit dozens of them into a larger starship like the Cerritos' cargo bays and get through the entire crew quickly. Whereas if you were using the ship's holodecks, which maybe it's only got two, a ship like the Cerritos, I'm not actually too sure, maybe it's got two holodecks, say it's got two. That means you test individual crewmen one at a time. You've got a crew of 100, you've got two holodecks. Each test, say, takes an hour. You see what I'm saying here? You're taking a long time, but you get these things in place. You can do the entire crew in a day. It's incredible. It is a perfect technology. It is a genius idea of Starfleet or the Federation rather, to engineer such a technology. I don't think these would have been an overall, perhaps a Starfleet invention, but I can see Starfleet setting up the requirements for them. Because there's no evidence to me that Starfleet is the main engineer of the entire Federation. It's not like it was the Roman army, which, if you're interested, the Roman army tended to do everything. It's why when the Empire fell, it was a bit crap for everybody, because all the skills went where, at least a lot of them. That's very generalizing, but it is in general. They did a lot of it. Starfleet don't go around the galaxy building every building, creating every bridge, setting up every power grid, fixing everyone's cars. No. So they wouldn't invent every technology, but they would certainly progress it. And I can see Starfleet getting their hands on some of this and going, you know what, we could really use. And basically, you put people into these little pods, which, if anyone noticed, and I noticed, and I couldn't help but notice the similarities, they look a hell of a lot like the teleportation units used by Brundlefly from the movie The Fly. Just saying. Probably not, but it's what they kind of reminded me of. Anyway, getting off topic, as I usually do, segueing into something that's completely irrelevant. They are a genius idea, and I really love them. I love how compact, efficient, and practical this technology is. It is task orientated. I don't know if they had an independent power source or if they powered off the ship's power grid. It may have been a combination of the two, them having an onboard limited power cell, but more likely I can imagine you'd hook them up to the starship that you're operating from, because clearly they hooked up the ship's systems for projecting the holograms and all the rest of it anyway. And you tailor each environment and each scenario to each specific crew member. You have like a library of a few thousand stock scenarios which are tailored for each crew member at a different level of their career, at different ranks and at different abilities. And you could imagine how much of an immensely effective training tool this would be and how efficient it was. And I absolutely adore them. They are genuinely one of the best things I've ever seen engineering wise in Starfleet, and I can really see how these would be useful and why. I mean, obviously the drilling structure corrupted it, and Starfleet needs to put some better security protocols in place, but they booted her. If you've not seen the episode, spoilers by the way, she was a bit of a corrupt officer who rigged the tests so the crew would fail, because she was concerned that Starfleet was going to axe the drill instructors. Remarkably, she mentions Federation. One of the things I also like about Lower Decks is it emphasizes the fact the Federation is more than just Starfleet, something that is often mentioned but not shown in Star Trek probably for budgetary reasons, let's face it. But it's obvious that all the member states have their own fleets, and there are different departments and divisions and organizations. For example, you've got Starfleet, but also seen in Lower Decks you've got Division 14, which I'm going to do a video on. You've also got Section 31, not strictly speaking a Starfleet organization, but is definitely affiliated with, but spun off from, but is still operating independently. It operates its own ships, does its own training, and operates its own missions, and doesn't answer, at least not anymore, directly to Starfleet. And I got the impression that this officer, although she was clearly testing Starfleet personnel, was a Federation official, a Federation officer, sort of federal agent who went not just around Starfleet, but probably around, say, the Vulcan fleet or the Andorian Imperial Guard and performed similar tests. And these would be the perfect way to do that, because they would be universal. It wouldn't matter what species you were or what fleet you were testing. It was a completely simulated environment. It doesn't need to be overly detailed. It doesn't need to be long. It doesn't need to be able to simulate an entire planet, just the limited scenarios. And we see it in the actual scenarios where they try to enter a door and it blocks them and says, nah, it's outside the scope of the program, probably because of limitations of the program and the size of the unit. I mean, the crew might feel like they're running, but obviously they're pretty much running on the spot, because at least in a holodeck you can still move around a room. It's a very, very small room. It's practically a cupboard. But so for the limitations, like in the Western simulation where she can't leave the town, things like that, which is not only a nod to the original series episode where they couldn't leave the town, but also it's a clear limitation of the program. The environment doesn't exist beyond the border of the town. You might be able to see it, but it's a false illusion. It's even more of an illusion than what you're in. It's like a matte painting. So, anyway, and I really genuinely love them. I thought they were brilliant. So, that brings me to the end of this video and my ramble on this, and how fascinating and how fantastic this technology is, how it is perfect for Starfleet and it is perfect for the Federation. And with that said, let me know in the comments below what you thought of it, if you've seen the episode, and I apologize if there are spoilers and you've not seen it. Really, if you should have watched it by now, because love it or hate it, you should. And saying that, I'm patching onto the end of this video what was going to be my original opener to this episode, but I rambled on for about 5 minutes, and it's mostly my rambling about how I don't really like Star Trek Lower Decks. So if that's something you want to listen to, because I figured most people wouldn't, because it basically is the same length of this video, I took it out and I redid the opener. That's why the opener was so short. And I'm going to stick it on the end just in case anyone does want to listen to me ramble on. It'll be unedited, it's just going to be a one long clip, but it's on the end, feel free. With that said, like, share, subscribe, comment down below, and thank you for watching. Bye bye. Hello there, welcome to the channel. This is Nerd World, and today I'm going into a subject matter which I love, which is Star Trek. But unfortunately, and I'm going to announce this at the gate, anyone that's watched my channel and my Star Trek videos in particular will know I do like classic Trek, and I actually like new Trek. I'm fairly neutral with both. I like both. I actually like Star Trek Discovery. I don't like every part of it, but I like enough of it that I like it. Same with Picard. That said, I do prefer older Trek, but only because it's what I grew up with. But that said, there are parts of older Trek I don't particularly like. I'm looking at you, Spock's brain. Star Trek, the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. I love them all, but I don't love everything about them. I like Star Trek Discovery. I love Star Trek Discovery, actually, but I don't like everything about it. I'm sort of the same on both sides of the fence. I'm going somewhere with this. However, I've always been a lot more neutral where animated shows are concerned. For example, the original Star Trek series, animated one anyway, it depends on who you talk to. Some people think it's canon, some don't. Roddenberry himself made conflicting statements on the subject. Me personally, I've never seen the original animated series as canonical, but certain things that have been mentioned or happened in more modern Star Trek series, I think even possibly in Enterprise, I'll have to look into that, reference things from which would be in the animated series, so it might be considered canonical. So unfortunately, Star Trek Lower Decks is canon, and I'm sorry for all the people out there that really don't want it to be. Now, I'm not on the fence side of I don't want it to be canon. I want it to be canon. I want to love it, but I just don't, because I can't get into animated. It's the same with Star Wars. I don't understand why everything ever created Star Wars has to be canonical. A comic book strip wrote in a random magazine once has to be canonical. Every game has to be canonical. It can't just be inspired by or just be a game without it having to be canonical. It's one of the things I like more about Star Trek. The novels and the comics are not all usually considered canonical unless something makes them canonical. There's only a handful of examples of graphic novels and books that are considered canonical. And Lower Decks, for me, it took me a while to get into it. It took me a while to get past just episode 1. I found it so tedious. I found myself ranting at it going, this is canon? Really? This is awful. And it is awful. I'm sorry, it's awful. I don't like Rick and Morty, which doesn't help. But then again, I shouldn't have to like Rick and Morty to like Star Trek. Now, Futurama was like a sci-fi series that leaned heavily into Star Trek, clearly because they were fans of it, and I can clearly tell that the people that made Lower Decks know Star Trek really effing well, like really well, and the amount of Easter eggs and nods to other things that are in it are phenomenal. Unfortunately for me, what lets it down is the sheer amount of comedy. Star Trek is not a comedy show. The antics and behaviours of many of the crew members would not be tolerated in an organisation like Starfleet, as I understand it. A pseudo-militaristic scientific research and policing organization would not tolerate people walking around naked, screaming and shouting and bellowing, answering the captain back, not knowing what's happening day to day. Boimler is an idiot and doesn't belong in Starfleet. Mariner is dangerous, so I don't get it. I don't get how these people would thrive in the Star Trek. Now, I understand that it's Lower Decks, and it's this, and it's that, and there's reasons, and it's the California class, it's not the Galaxy class, it's meant to be the Lower Decks. And I get that, I do, I understand it's a different creed of officers, men and women that don't necessarily want to progress. Mariner doesn't want to be a captain, she was happy as an ensign. But quite frankly, looking at her, I don't understand why she's in Starfleet at all, not because Starfleet should have booted her by now through court-martialing, through all of her breaking of the rules, Prime Directive, anything she bloody well wants, not to mention her severe misconduct in front of admirals and other officers, blatant disrespect of authority, all the rest of it. Competent officer or not, doesn't matter. She'd have been booted, but that's besides the point. She herself doesn't seem to like Starfleet, at least superficially. Maybe deep down she's passionate about it, but on the surface level it doesn't make sense. The whole show. So I've tried, I've watched it, and I've now come to find things in it that I do like, because I do try to look on the positive, and there are many elements of it I do like, as much as I personally would like to believe Lower Decks is more inspired by an homage to Star Trek, but like the Orville, and then I can get by with it being a comedy show. The idea that Star Trek has always been so grounded is difficult for me to wrap my head around it not being so grounded. That's just me. It's my personal opinion. I'm going to watch it the same as I'm going to watch Prodigy when I can finally get around to that, although I really, really disliked the first couple of episodes of that, which is another rant for another day. But anyway, Lower Decks. And with all of that out of the way, which is nearly 6 minutes, hope you're still with me, I'm going to look at something in it I did really like, which is some of the tech which we see. And I do like, one of the things I do like in Lower Decks is it's more honest. And it's really honest about what holodecks would realistically be used for, because I know damn well what I would use a holodeck for. I love Shakespeare. Shakespeare is amazing. But it's really honest about what they would really be used for by most people. And it's the same with everything else in it. It's realistic in that regard. So one thing I did like were the holo simulation pods we saw brought aboard the ship to test the crew. So that's what this episode is going to be about. So please like, share, subscribe, comment down below, and let's get into actually discussing what this video is about.